The Trump administration's sweeping crackdown in Minneapolis has drawn attention to ICE's tactics, and it's left many Americans wondering who exactly has the agency been employing, even as they now lower recruitment standards and launch a so-called wartime recruitment push. And how is pressure to amp up numbers maybe allowing agents' actions to fly under the radar right now? Not to mention, they keep insisting that they're out there getting the worst of the worst off the street, so they must all be choir boys and patriots, right? Well, we have a few questions about some of these guys. First, I want you to meet Scott Deseroth, an ICE agent based out of Miami. Police pulled him over in August after seeing his car, quote, swerve across all lanes. Deseroth told officers several times during his sobriety test that he was federal law enforcement. And when they continued to insist he do the exercises, listen here to how he speaks to one of the black officers.
Are you Haitian?
That's nothing to do with my race, buddy.
My question was, are you Haitian?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where he's from.
And then there's Samuel Saxon of Ohio. The police there were called on this ICE agent for a domestic incident, and the police report showed that his girlfriend said she had suffered a fractured pelvis alongside bruises all over her body. Witnesses told police Saxon, quote, dragged the woman down the hallway in a chokehold. Saxon has not been convicted of these allegations and has pled not guilty to one count of making false statements to a federal officer who is investigating felonious assault, domestic violence, and strangulation charges against Saxon from that alleged assault. The Ohio Immigrant Alliance compiled records showing that Saxon had been the subject of 22 calls to police within a year and a half, all while he was still serving as an ICE agent. And in Illinois, Guillermo Diaz-Torres was leaving a shift at the Broadview Detention Center when he crashed his car off the side of a road, eventually leading to his arrest for a DUI. Take a listen to this.
Okay, so where were you exactly?
No, I was at work. I was at Broadview.
Okay, you were at Broadview.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
what were you doing over there at work?
Working.
Just you weren't hanging around after work or anything like that? You
Not
were
at all.
just at work, okay. Did you go anywhere else after work?
No, sir.
In statements responding to each of these cases, DHS confirmed that Deseroth is now on administrative leave, Saxon is absent without leave, and Diaz-Torres has been placed on administrative duties, adding that, quote, ICE thoroughly investigates the background of each individual it hires and takes allegations of misconduct by its employees extremely seriously. Joining us now is Brenna Smith. She is a visual investigations reporter at the Wall Street Journal. Also joining us is Veronica Cardenas. She is a former assistant chief counsel at ICE and the CEO and founder of Humanigration. It's great to have both of you here at the table with us. So, Veronica, I will begin with you because you used to work in ICE. You know the processes, the steps, the expectations around this work. What did you see in those videos?
I saw that officers believe that they have absolute immunity, like J.D. Vance stated that they did. And this is a symptom of the discretion that immigration laws have. Because it's border security, because it's issues of national security, they really do have broad authority in how they are enforcing those laws. And what we're seeing now, especially in the courts, is how do we, you know, kind of, what's the word? How do we look at when there's use of excessive force? How do we tailor that? Courts in Chicago, in California, now in Minnesota, because there have been suits by protesters and by observers, and federal judges have stated that there has been excessive use of force. And the Seventh Circuit stated that Judge Ellis in Chicago overstepped her boundaries. And so they're really grappling, how do we limit the authority that immigration officers have? And when we don't, this is what we're seeing.
Can I ask you, how is it possible that someone could have 22 calls to police on them and they're still going to work, just going about their job as normal with the federal government? How is that possible?
Yeah, there is a duty to report that. I'm not sure if that was done in this case, because if they're not reporting it, there are periodic investigations done on employees. I think they're about 3 to 5 years done, like 3 to 5 years. Every 3 to 5 years they have to do those. But so I think that if they're not reporting it like they're supposed to, there's no one looking into whether these incidents actually happened.
Brenna, I want to ask you about their reporting, which it seems to relate to what their training is. We heard from Antonia about how there are some people who may be going into this agency with some checkered pasts or presence, even for that matter. But you did some reporting recently for the Wall Street Journal, finding that ICE officers have shot at vehicles at least 13 times since July, shooting at least 8 people and leaving at least 2 confirmed dead. What have you noticed across those 13 instances? What patterns have you seen that maybe suggest that these are not coincidences, that there's something in the training? Well, I don't want to put words into your mouth. You tell me if you think that there is a pattern here.
Yeah, so I was on a team of reporters, and our whole goal, the kind of question we were trying to answer was, how are these traffic stops and vehicle stops escalating? Traffic stops happen all across the country over 50,000 times a day. They're the most common law enforcement interaction ever. And there's also decades-long research about the best and safest ways to go about keeping not only civilians safe in traffic stops, but also the officers themselves. So what we did was, of those 13 instances, we were able to find 14 filmed footage of these shootings. And we interviewed about a dozen different current and former immigration officers, as well as policing training experts who have helped develop training curricula around traffic stops. And what they pointed to was essentially kind of 4 beats that were across these traffic stops. When officers would start the interaction, they would immediately box the vehicles in. Typically, best practices is that what they say would be reserved for, a high-risk situation. And you also have to make sure if you do that, you do it right. The cars are really snatched together. And that was something that was not always happening in the footage. The next that was another pattern that we were seeing was this idea of that there were characteristics where officers were often doing something that one expert called intrusive actions, reaching into the vehicle, grabbing onto the vehicle, then trying to prevent someone from fleeing. And then, unfortunately, in that, sometimes that would mean they would stand in the front of the path of a vehicle, their lives would be at risk, shots would be fired. So it was, those were kind of the patterns that we were seeing throughout.
And was it your understanding that these patterns were happening because the officers were not being trained to do otherwise, or because they were being trained to box in vehicles? Like, was this happening by accident and they were just all making the same mistakes, or were they were they copying a playbook essentially that put them at risk?
Yeah, something to be mindful of is a couple of things. First off, these were 4 instances that we were looking at, and there are, so many different immigration enforcement efforts happening across the country right now. So across those, 4 instances, these were the characteristics that we were seeing. As for the training, the unfortunate reality, I think, for a lot of people covering immigration right now in our country is that there's not a lot of visibility into what's happening. The insight we do know into training from our reporting is that they've had a surge of new recruits, and that they are having more field operation training within that new sector of employees, but we don't have a lot of visibility into specifics beyond that right now.
Well, we have reporting from the Atlantic that now training has been shortened to 47 days. And Veronica, you used to be a trainer participating in and teaching new recruits about the agency and about how to properly execute the law. What do you worry? If you have a concern, do you think that 47 days is enough for this kind of role?
I don't think it's enough, especially for new recruits who are coming in who maybe not know the law, don't know any law enforcement tactics. So you're splitting that up into training, like physical training, but also what the law is and what they can and cannot do. And so the law in and of itself is very complicated. To teach a Fourth Amendment class or a Fifth Amendment class takes time, especially for the officers to understand it. And so that does concern me. How ready are they to go out into the field and to arrest non-citizens, and now with the added layer of having to interact with many Americans while these protests are observers? How ready are they to do that?
Brenna Smith and Veronica Cardenas, thank you so much for joining us on set today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.